If they want to take away my libertarian card for that, I don't care. It's not worth that much anyways. Hey guys, I'm Hannah Cox with Base Politics, and you're watching the Base Politics podcast. Welcome back to the show. Don't forget, if you enjoy these episodes and you're on YouTube, leave me a like, a comment, and subscribe. You can also check out others from prior in the series. If you're on audio, if you're listening on iTunes, make sure to leave a review. We love to read your comments there as well. A little quick housekeeping for next week. I am taking off. I don't do that very often throughout the year, but I decided to give myself the 4th of July as a holiday because I love fireworks. So there will be no episode next Friday. You can take that time to catch up on other episodes or watch my other YouTube series, Histrionics, which is also now available on audio as well. So hope you take that time to celebrate the 4th of July, celebrate what freedoms we have left, and watch my content. All right, starting out this week, we have to catch up on a little bit of old news. The one big downside for me in doing this show weekly is that sometimes there are issues that happen I really want to talk about on the day of, but I don't get to them for about a week or so. So this news story is not new or breaking, but I do think I have a new spin on it, so I still want to cover it. I want to talk about the recent arrest of a has-been boy band member, Justin Timberlake. And before I get into the meat of the story, I just want to say, America, you need to answer for yourselves, okay? I am blameless in this. I was a Backstreet Boys fan. I had a normal, healthy crush on Nick Carter and Brian Luttrell. I never got the NSYNC appeal. I certainly never understood why anybody saw anything in this man. Look at him dancing. When did he bring sexy back? When was he ever sexy? This is atrocious. This is cringe. This is a man from Tennessee who mostly rips off black artists badly, and everything about him is a giant embarrassment. And listen, I've got lots of beef with JT. It's not even just that he is not all that talented and very embarrassing. It's also the way that he has treated numerous women that I have observed over the years. I don't think I even have to detail his treatment of Britney Spears. This has been well documented. I was very involved in the Free Britney movement a few years ago. And during that time, a lot of his previous interviews concerning her came to the surface. And let's just say they did not age well. That man drug her through the mud, blamed her for cheating when, according to her book, it was actually him that was running around on her and forcing her to get abortions, and literally used her in the media to launch his own career while turning the general public against her. He's a scumbag. And then you have the Janet Jackson episode a few years ago where he ripped her clothing off at the Super Bowl. And I don't even have time to touch on the long-suffering pick-me wife he has, Jessica Biel, but oh my gosh, this man loves nothing more than to throw egg on her face. From publicly flirting and probably cheating with co-stars to this latest incident, she constantly stands by her man, and it's not a good look. It's just not a good look, Jessica. And she was so pretty, you know, we really had high hopes for her. I don't understand how she got stuck with this man, but she is. So yeah, Justin's been a dusty scumbag for some time. I accidentally ended up at one of his restaurants/bars in Nashville last year, and I bought a glass of wine, and then I found out I had given him my money, and I was so mad I made everybody leave. I was like, no, we're out of here. We are getting out of here. I do not support this man. I have a yoga teacher who will not take his song off her playlist. It bothers me every time. He gets under my skin. I am not a fan. I don't like him. And if you want to see even more proof of just what a slimy little skis ball he is, I want you to watch this clip that resurfaced after news of his DUI broke. This is an interview he gave after an awards show a number of years ago, and while he's not directly calling out Britney Spears in it, it's very obviously subtweeting her.
Stop drinking. You know who you are. I'm speaking to you. Stop drinking. You're going to get sloppy. OK is going to say something bad about you.
OK is going to say something bad about you. That's obviously not a message for the general public. It's obviously very targeted at one particular celebrity who happened to be going out and partying pretty heavily at that time. As Martin Luther King Jr. once said, the moral arc of the universe is long, but it bends towards justice. And it seems like Britney and all the other people that have been over here in the JT hyper-awareness camp are finally getting a little bit of justice following the news of his DUI arrest. Let's watch this footage.
Excuse me, sir?
Oh, what up, dog?
You were swerving a lot back there.
Oh, where?
Can you step out of the vehicle?
Oh, for shiz.
Why don't you start by telling me your name?
Friends call me Lake. Timberlake.
Have you been drinking tonight, sir?
I've had a couple dirty martinis and a sea breeze. It doesn't matter what car I drive or how much I have to drink.
And it does matter. Blow into this, sir? Stop. Can you blow into this, sir? Stop beatboxing. No beatboxing.
If I call my lawyer, do you think he'd get me off of this?
He couldn't.
It's gonna ruin the soundtrack.
What soundtrack?
The soundtrack to Trolls 4.
Look, Pharrell.
Come back, hey!
Okay, I'm just kidding. We don't actually have footage of the arrest, but I honestly think that's probably exactly how it went down. Here's the actual news coverage.
Justin Timberlake returns to the stage for the first time since being arrested and charged with driving while intoxicated in the Hamptons.
It's been a tough week, but you're here, and I'm here, and nothing can change this moment right now. I know sometimes I'm hard to love, but you keep on loving me, and I love you right back.
Timberlake spoke before a cheering crowd in Chicago last night, where he's expected to perform again tonight. Fans rallied to show their support.
People make mistakes, and no one's condoning the alleged drinking and driving, of course.
It says, "You are loved until the end of time." He has a song called "The End of Time," so I wanted to pass him out today, so you can give him a little extra love.
The pop star was arrested Tuesday in Sag Harbor, New York. Sources tell ABC News he blew through a stop sign and then swerved into the opposite lane. He claimed to have had only one drink, but police say that Timberlake had bloodshot, glassy eyes, slurred speech, and even smelled of alcohol. The pop star has been ordered to appear virtually in court next month.
I honestly was really unaware Justin Timberlake still had fans left that would even come to a show. Like, his recent album totally bombed. It was universally panned. Even the New York Times has basically called him a has-been. And actually, I thought the fact that the cop did not know who he was when he arrested him might have been the funniest part in this whole scenario.
And as you might expect, the Britney fans did not take that lightly, and there appears to be a sense of almost pleasure out of Timberlake's recent misfortune. Even the New York Times is basically calling him a has-been in its coverage of it. So what is going on with Justin? Well, to answer that question, I'm joined right now by Perez Hilton. He may be the internet's most famous gossip columnist. He's the editor-in-chief of PerezHilton.com, which is one of the world's go-to sites for celebrity news. Perez, welcome to the show. So what is going on with JT here?
I think what we're seeing is an ego check. You know, it would not shock me if Justin Timberlake has driven drunk before. It didn't surprise me that his friends weren't more adamant that he not drive. He's been able to, for decades, skate through life and difficult situations because he is Justin Timberlake, because he is rich and good looking and white and a man. And what we've been seeing over the last few years is what used to work for him doesn't work for him anymore, both professionally and personally.
You talked about an ego check. This is number two. Let's put it up here. The police officer who pulled Timberlake over was apparently so young that he didn't even know who the 10-time Grammy Award winner was. This is according to the New York Post. He didn't recognize him or his name. A second source adds that Justin said under his breath, "This is going to ruin the tour." The cop replied, "What tour?" Justin said, "The world tour." So in terms of his, relevance, particularly among younger people, it's, big issue here.
I love that. I looked it up, and the cop who arrested him really was like a toddler when Bye 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 was the #1 song on TRL, which is, I don't know, that's just makes you feel old. It even makes me feel old, to be honest. So yeah, Justin Timberlake is a grade A asshat. I think that's been apparent for many, many years. And one thing I also thought was apparent is that anybody who drinks and drives is an asshat. It's a stupid, selfish thing to do that gets lots and lots of people killed every single year. When I was 16, I actually lost a cousin of mine to a car accident death. She was only 26 years old. She was not hit by a drunk driver. But because of that incident, me and my entire family are very, very sensitive around traffic incidents. We're very hyper aware of the dangers that are always present anytime you step into a car. And I have no patience whatsoever for any single person who gets behind the wheel and doesn't take that responsibility very, very seriously. But it seems there are far too many people in my own camp, which would be sort of the libertarian apparatus, who want to debate that fact. And I guess that shouldn't surprise me because libertarians want to debate everything. There's nothing a libertarian likes more than arguing with another libertarian. But I had not come across this particular beehive until the past week. So I want to discuss this particular story from two different angles. One, are DUI laws principled? Should they be constitutional? Should they be on the books? Are they something we should have? And then secondarily, if so, are they applied fairly and written in a just way? So let's jump in. Now, this particular debate came to my attention last week when the New York Post wrote what can only really be described as a hit piece covering the cop who arrested Justin Timberlake. They shared their article on Twitter with a photo of the cop alongside Timberlake and a caption that said, "Rookie Sergeant Harbor cop who arrested Justin Timberlake, already well known by locals for strict enforcement of traffic laws after just 3 months on the force." They went on to note in their piece, in just 3 months on the force, Arkansas has earned a reputation among Sag Harbor's wealthy residents, earning nicknames like the Sag Harbor Nazi and Little Red-Headed Dipshit for strict enforcement of traffic laws. I honestly was a little taken aback by this piece. Like, this just seems like a completely counterintuitive angle to attack the cop who rightfully arrested somebody who was drinking and driving, who happens to be a powerful celebrity that typically gets away with anything he wants to. And now we're going to target this cop who, by the way, is a rookie and just doing his job and probably doesn't really have a lot of power or ability to even try to cut corners. Like, what gives? So I quote tweeted, I know, even I have to defend cops sometimes. It's wild. So I quote tweeted it and I said, drinking and driving laws should be strictly enforced. These assholes kill people every year. And while there's really never any excuse to do it, it is especially inexcusable for anyone who can afford a driver, much less an Uber. And that's when the libertarians came for me. One of the first comments under my post said, "I'm just waiting on a libertarian to comment, quote, drinking and driving laws are unconstitutional, LMAO. And I was like, wait, do they think that? Yes. They think that. Blue Lion Politics said, "I thought the libertarian viewpoint was that victimless crimes are not real crimes." Another handle, JB Trader, said, "Drinking and driving laws should be abolished. No victim equals no crime." Robert Yates said, "How nice of you to project your perspective of common good on everyone else. Where is the victim in drunk driving if no property or bodies were harmed? P.S. I'm sober myself, but I stand up for self-ownership regardless of how much I dislike it sometimes." Now listen, anybody who's followed me for long knows that I am no fan of police. I am far from being a back the blue no matter who type. I have passed numerous pieces of legislation trying to reform our criminal justice system. I have overturned the death penalty in 3 states. I have been hypercritical of police for years and years in the media. I have an entire show on this channel called Copaganda discussing the bad behavior of cops. And as a whole, I cannot stand the way we structure policing. I think it should be completely razed to the ground and built back in a sane, sensible, and effective manner. That's not what we currently have in operation. And one component of policing that drives me nuts is how we currently have a bunch of little road pirates that spend their time out looking for things they can ticket people for and take their money over versus going and solving real crimes. Police are really, really bad at actually solving crimes. You need to check out clearance rates if you don't know what I'm talking about. The best law enforcement statistics in the nation come out of the FBI, and their clearance rates for homicides are under 60%. And it just goes down from there when you get into the lower levels of policing. I mean, it is really, really difficult to get violent crime solved. And homicides are the ones that are most likely to get solved. When you start talking about rapes or assault or armed robberies, forget about it. So I absolutely do have beef with police out here looking around, searching for people with tiny infractions that they can just pull over, harass, and get money out of. I don't think that's what they should be doing. But that being said, recklessly driving, which includes drinking and driving, should be against the law. Those people do need to be gotten off the roads immediately before they hurt somebody, and I think in many cases, they should be arrested. When you are driving a car, you are operating one of the most deadly pieces of equipment in the universe. Cars kill far more people than guns do every single year. Drinking and driving should be illegal for the same reason that it's illegal to walk into a room and start shooting at random. Even if you don't end up hitting somebody and killing them, you are still being so reckless, so negligent, and your actions have a high propensity of harming someone or killing them, and what you are doing should not be legal. If they want to take away my libertarian card for that, I don't care. It's not worth that much anyways. And I want to give you some numbers just to show you how big of an issue this continues to be. According to the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, more than 13,000 people died in alcohol-related crashes in the U.S. in 2024, which is the second year in a row that number has been reached. This equates to about 37 people dying in drunk driving crashes every day, or one person every 39 minutes. Drunk driving accidents are also responsible for about 1/3 of all traffic-related deaths. And again, there's no excuse. You can call an Uber, you can call a taxi. If you can't afford to do that, you can't afford to go out drinking. Stay home and don't be a selfish asshole. There's literally no excuse. None. And especially for somebody like Justin Timberlake, he can afford a chauffeur. He can afford an Uber helicopter. I have zero grace for him, and honestly, zero grace for anybody who does this. But now onto the second consideration here that I want to bring up, which is that if these laws are justified in being on the books, and I think they are they written in a just way, right? And that's something you always need to think about when you talk about public policies is one, first and foremost, if they should exist. And I think there's a very small, narrow window for which laws should be put on the books in the first place. And then once you get to a place of agreeing that something does need to be against the law, it does need to be on the books, you need to ensure that the public policy is written in such a way that it does not have significant ripple effects, that it is narrowly tailored, that is equally applied to all people, and that it is constitutionally applied. So let's look at how drinking and driving laws are actually done, because while I think they should exist, I also think they are a bit fishy. So in the US, our limit for drinking and driving is a 0.08 BAC, which is blood alcohol concentration. That's the limit. And actually, it's higher than many European countries, which is surprising because drinking's even more ingrained, I would say, in most European cultures. But over there, a 0.05 BAC is actually the norm. However, that being said, it is still a very arbitrary limit, and I think in large part that's because it's a money grab. I did some digging on the history of how we got this number on the books, and here's what I found. In the 1980s, Mothers Against Drunk Driving played a pivotal role in advocating for stricter drunk driving laws across the U.S. At that time, the suggested limit for alcohol in the blood was 0.10 BAC before an individual was considered under the influence. MAD argued that a lower threshold would prevent the need to prove actual intoxication once a person crossed the 0.10 BAC mark. Their impairment would be evident. Eventually, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration settled on a 0.08 BAC limit, marking a significant reduction. To ensure compliance, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration wielded its influence by threatening to withdraw federal transportation funds from states that failed to enact DUI per se laws incorporating the 0.08 BAC standard. So right then and there, I have a problem because they made the limit arbitrarily low. They didn't want to have to prove that somebody was actually intoxicated, and so they just made it where it was pretty easy to get almost anybody who'd had anything to drink. The reality is the BAC measurement is not really a fair measurement of who is truly intoxicated. And that can be due to size, that can be due to the types of drinks someone's having, that can be due to how much they drink and what their typical consumption is. That can give people much higher tolerance. So whether or not a person's actually impaired at that limit is very arbitrary. It's just a hard line they wanted to have on their books, again, so that they didn't have to actually prove wrongdoing. And that I have an issue with. And obviously, as you can see, there was a lot of lobbying that went into this. There was a lot of federal pressure on the states. But at the end of the day, states continue to defend these laws pretty stringently because they're making a pretty penny off of them. There are a number of ways that states and cities and police departments collect in this whole process, and it's actually kind of important to pay attention to this. Now, the average amount a person will have to spend if they get a DUI in the U.S. is around $10,000. And that's made up by a number of different factors that come into play once charges are pressed. One, you often have the fines themselves. DUI offenders often face substantial fines, which can range from hundreds to thousands of dollars, depending on the severity of the offense and whether it's a first-time or repeat offense. Secondly, you have court costs and fees. There are usually additional court costs and administrative fees that offenders must pay, which can include probation fees, alcohol education program fees, and more. Third, you have towing and impound fees. Offenders often have their vehicles towed and impounded, resulting in additional fees. Fourth, you have alcohol education and treatment programs. Offenders may be required to attend mandatory alcohol education or treatment programs, which are typically funded by the offenders themselves. Fifth, you have restitution and community service fees. Some jurisdictions may require offenders to pay restitution or perform community service, which can include administrative fees. And then lastly, you have license reinstatement fees, which is when after a DUI conviction has passed, offenders have to pay a fee to get their licenses reinstated. So all that to say, yes, DUI laws should be on the books, but also yes, there are room for improvement and probably some corruption going on behind the scenes within them. As a whole, though, it is worth knowing that since these laws were put into place in the 1980s, drinking and driving deaths have actually decreased by about 50%. And I still think there are other non-governmental solutions we should look to that could continue to reduce those numbers. Things like education, moving restrictions so that Uber and Lyft can be more available, which, by the way, a lot of politicians have tried to restrict at the behest of the cab industry. Super corrupt. And technologies like breath scanners. All right, well, while Justin Timberlake got locked up temporarily, another person is finally free. Guys, I am so excited to bring you this news. I've cared about this for so long. This is a day I really doubted would ever come, but Julian Assange is finally free as of this week. According to the BBC, Julian Assange has landed back in his native Australia after a plea deal allowed him to walk free from a London prison. There were emotional scenes at Canberra Airport as the WikiLeaks founder kissed his wife and hugged his father, his lawyers watching on, visibly moved. Julian needs time to recover to get used to his freedom, Stella Assange said at a news conference shortly after her husband arrived. For the past 14 years, Assange has been in a legal battle with U.S. officials who accused him of leaking classified documents, which they say put lives in danger. The 52-year-old did not attend the news conference in Canberra, instead letting his lawyer and wife speak for him. You have to understand what he's been through, Mrs. Assange said, adding that they need time to let our family be a family. The couple married in London's Belmarsh prison in 2022 and have 2 children together. The plea deal saw Julian Assange plead guilty to 1 charge of conspiracy to obtain and disclose national defense information rather than the 18 he was originally facing. The case centered around a massive WikiLeaks disclosure in 2010 when the website released a video from a U.S. military helicopter which showed civilians being killed in the Iraqi capital of Baghdad. It also published thousands of confidential documents suggesting that the U.S. military had killed hundreds of civilians in unreported incidents during the war in Afghanistan. The revelations became a huge story, prompting reaction from all corners of the globe and led to intense scrutiny of American involvement in foreign conflicts. Assange formally entered the charge on the remote Northern Mariana Islands, an American territory in the Pacific, 2 days after leaving the Belmarsh prison. In return, he was sentenced to time already served and released to fly home. His lawyer, Jen Robinson, told media that the deal was criminalization of journalism and set a dangerous precedent. Echoing this, Mrs. Assange said she hopes the media realize the danger of this U.S. case against Julian that has secured his conviction for news gathering and publishing information that was true, that the public deserved to know. His lawyer also gave details on a phone call between Assange and Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese, who has been instrumental in securing his release. Assange told the Prime Minister that he saved his life, Mrs. Robinson said, adding, "I don't think that's an exaggeration. This is a huge win that Australia stood up to an ally and demanded the return of an Australian citizen," she said. The U.S. State Department said its involvement with Assange's case has been very limited. LOL. It added that the 52-year-old's actions had put the lives of U.S. partners, allies, and diplomats at risk, and that the WikiLeaks releases had chilled the ability of U.S. diplomats to build relationships abroad. Assange spent the last 5 years behind bars at London's high-security Belmarsh prison, fighting the U.S. attempts to extradite him to face charges over the document leaks. Yeah, his release did hurt U.S. relations because it exposed war crimes that our government was working to cover up. I'm not often a fan of Tucker Carlson, but when it comes to matters of war and civil liberties, he's very often based, and he happened to be in Australia while this whole thing was going down and gave the best remarks. I want to roll his reaction.
Anybody who knows anything about that case and believes that Assange should still be in prison is your enemy, by the way, and the enemy of human freedom and flourishing. It was monstrous that he spent 12 years locked away for exposing other people's crimes. Typically the way it works, I don't know if law enforcement's the same here, but the guy who discovers the crime doesn't go to jail. It's the guy who commits the crime goes to jail. And that's been inverted in his case. So I think it's wonderful news, as you all know. He's in Guam dealing with one of our colonial magistrates. I didn't know even we had those, but we do apparently in the United States. And then he'll be flying here where he was born. And my impression is, I was texting with his wife this morning, my impression is he plans to stay here for a while. And so I think, that's a huge net benefit to your country because he's a good man. I know him. I visited him a few months ago in Belmarsh prison and saw how they were effectively torturing him to death. And what I didn't realize until I got there, even though I've been steeped in the case, I know his relatives, I know his wife Stella, is that he was never charged with a crime in Great Britain. Never. He was charged with no crime. So in the free world, we don't hold people who haven't been charged with a crime. And we don't hold them in my country beyond a year unless they've been convicted of a crime or they're on trial for a crime. That's just the most obvious abuse of human rights. And it went on for 12 years. And he's an Australian. And I'm sorry, I don't mean this as a criticism, just I think this is a perspective providing observation. But why did anyone allow that? He was held in the UK on behalf of the United States, which, by the way, until recently hadn't charged him with a crime either. And when it did charge him with a fake crime under an ancient statute that no one has ever charged under, the Espionage Act, to which he pleaded guilty, apparently, finally, yesterday. He didn't violate it, but he just wanted to get out of prison before he died. But he wasn't charged in the US. He wasn't charged in the UK. He was an Australian. And those three countries are aligned more closely than countries typically are. They're three of the Five Eyes, as you know. And nobody did anything about it. And I kept thinking, when is Australia going to send a warship up the Thames to get their guy back? I mean it. What is that?
You guys, our rights are really hanging on the line in many instances, not just in the US, but globally. And what happened to Julian Assange should be of concern to you. This is a man who, as a member of the free press, exposed war crimes the American people had every right to know about. He didn't endanger anybody. This is a lie you will hear told over and over and over by puppets of the military-industrial complex who do not want to have to face accountability. And they mostly don't have to, because your free press in the US is mostly dead. It's mostly dead. It's not functioning. The only branches of it that are functioning are the independent media outlets. Most of the people in the media simply repeat whatever the experts tell them to, and the experts are just government officials. They're just people who are working for the state. They are people who are working to cover up their own crimes and those of their friends. What Julian Assange did was heroic, but it really shouldn't be considered heroic because actually he was just doing his job as a journalist. Okay, that's what they should be doing. And it was important information the American people needed to know. And yet for exposing human rights violations, he then had his human rights violated for 12 years, and very few people lifted a finger. Now, Julian was very, very lucky. He had a dedicated family, not only his wife, but his brother Gabriel, his father. I've actually met many of them. They have been working tirelessly for years to raise money for his defense, to raise awareness about what's happening to him, and to try to get him out of this prison where he was indeed being tortured in Britain. He was being held in almost solitary confinement. Anybody who got to see him, which was very seldom, said that he was losing weight rapidly. He was looking worse and worse. This was truly a dire situation. When Julian Assange first broke his report with the help of Chelsea Manning, this was during the Obama administration. And one thing you need to know, whether or not you already hate Obama or you still think he was like some great president, is Obama was probably the most punitive punisher of whistleblowers this country has ever seen. Julian Assange was one of many, many whistleblowers that his administration went after and persecuted heavily. And it was at the behest of our government that what was happening to Julian in Britain was happening, right? They were doing this as our ally, at our behest. The only reason they weren't able to extradite him was, again, because he had a pretty good legal team his family was able to fundraise for and pay. Otherwise, they probably would have extradited him here, and the U.S. government was trying to charge him with 18 different counts for which he certainly would have faced life in prison and maybe even worse. Now, one thing Tucker Carlson pointed out that I think is important, vital to know, is that the one thing he has pled to, the one charge they're still sticking him with, is under the Espionage Act. And this is something that got put into place in the early 1900s. It was put into place under President Woodrow Wilson, which was our worst president of all time, right? Second only, followed closely by FDR, but Woodrow Wilson was atrocious. And the Espionage Act was put into place during the First World War explicitly to shut up the free press. It made it to where they could imprison anybody who criticized the U.S. government over matters of war. And they used it. They put numerous people in prison over this, notably a socialist at the time who was a very prominent socialist who was very anti-war. They used it to lock him up. And it's something they have continued to use mostly against people who criticize war. It needs to be repealed. It should not be on the books. It's a disgusting injustice and perversion of the First Amendment on its face every single time it's applied. And that's certainly true in this matter as well. Now, I have some really good footage of Julian getting off the plane in Australia I want to roll just for you to see kind of a happy turn of events here. I, again, having watched his family work so hard, having watched his wife raising 2 kids without him, kids he hasn't really gotten to know or grew up with, getting to actually have their father and her husband back with them. I can't even imagine what this moment was like.
Sorry, Jeremy, I need to interrupt you. We now have live feeds, basically, of Julian stepping out of the plane in Canberra.
Oh, please, let's see it.
Oh, it's such a... Well done, he's walking on the tarmac. I don't know, he's waving to the crowd. It's such a joyous moment. I'm not sure you can see it, but believe me, this is such an emotional moment. He is looking so great. Just.
I saw pictures of him. He looked a lot better than last time I saw him.
Well, if you think that I have maybe backtracked a few years, I can tell you that he's looking a lot better than inside Belmarsh prison on Saturday. It's such a great moment. He's clenching his fists and waving to the crowd. What a great moment in history to witness and be a part of it, Jeremy. And thank you. I mean, we should all be.
I'm just getting it on my phone now. Wow.
He is meeting Stella now. Oh my God. Kissing Stella, this is, my God. And John Shipton is there, his father, reuniting with the family. What a great moment, Jeremy, to be watching this. This is something we've been fighting for, waiting for. Absolutely fantastic. It is. It's, oh my God, it's hard not to be emotional under these circumstances, Jeremy. I hope you appreciate that.
Absolutely.
It's been something we've been waiting for a very long time.
Oh, that's amazing.
Isn't it? My God.
Oh my gosh, I'm tearing up. This reminds me of that moment in To Kill a Mockingbird when they say to Scout, stand up, Scout, your father's passing, and all of the Black people in the upper balcony stand up as Atticus Finch walks by, and I think that's so many of us watching him get off that plane. I just really think he's so heroic, and we need so many more people like him. So this is an amazing turn of events, and it really blows my mind whenever these kinds of discussions come up that there are people who will literally say to you with a straight face that he did something wrong, that he's the bad guy, that he should be in prison. They'll say this to you about him. They'll say it about Snowden. It is shockingly ignorant. I can't fathom being such a little sheep to just download everything the government tells you and believe it. But for those of you who might still be in that camp, I want to roll this clip from the iconic Glenn Greenwald discussing those sentiments.
It drives me crazy that CNN runs around constantly saying how they combat disinformation, and they're repeatedly putting falsehoods on the air like that. And I showed this on social media today. I'm going to send it to Caitlin Collins, and I guarantee you they won't correct it because they are happy to publish absolutely false claims as long as it serves the cause that they want. Now, the other claim Andrew McCabe made, which is the most common one, is that the reason why Julian Assange should be imprisoned is because documents he published endangered the lives of multiple people, including Iraqi informants. I defy anybody to show one document WikiLeaks published that endangered in any way the life of a single person. And in fact, McClatchy, which was a part of Knight Ridder, the only major media outlet before the war in Iraq that got the story about Iraqi WMDs correct, they were constantly publishing articles saying there was no evidence of Iraqi WMD. In 2010, they investigated these claims from the Pentagon that WikiLeaks has blood on their hands, that they endangered the lives of a huge number of people. And here's what they concluded. Here's McClatchy, September 25th, 2010. The date on the article is 2013 because they went back 3 years later and did a minor correction. But the actual date of publication is 2010. And the headline is, officials may be overstating the danger from WikiLeaks. Quote, American officials in recent days have warned repeatedly that the release of documents by WikiLeaks could put people's lives in danger. But despite similar warnings ahead of the previous 2 massive releases of classified U.S. intelligence reports by the website, U.S. officials concede that they have no evidence to date that the documents led to anyone's death. And again, all of these documents are documents that WikiLeaks partnered with the New York Times and the Guardian to publish. And both those newspapers, as well as WikiLeaks, went to the government beforehand and said, if there are documents in here that you think could endanger people, tell us what they are. And many of those documents were, in fact, redacted to protect the lives of innocent people. But it is commonplace to hear over and over people like this saying, WikiLeaks put the lives of people in danger with these publications. They have no analysis about why what they did was different than the New York Times and the Guardian. In every single case, you go back and look at the Snowden release or the release of the Pentagon Papers, the government always claims release of these documents put people's lives in danger. I spent years after doing the Snowden reporting when people said that, and they often did, saying, give me one example of one document that put anyone's life in danger, and nobody ever could. Same with the Pentagon Papers. Nobody's life was endangered by the Pentagon Papers. The only people who are endangered by these leaks are the criminals inside the U.S. government whose crimes end up being revealed. But you would think if a FBI deputy director went on to CNN to claim that these WikiLeaks documents published with the New York Times and the Guardian put people's lives in danger, someone like Caitlin Collins would say, well, how specifically did they do that? Which documents did the New York Times and the Guardian and WikiLeaks publish, and whose lives ended up being endangered? Or they would refer to this investigation showing that even the government admitted they had no evidence to justify that claim. Or there would be pushback when Andrew McCabe just lies and said, WikiLeaks, unlike other journalists, doesn't contact the government before publication, when clearly that is exactly what he did.
I think Glenn put that spectacularly. The only people that were endangered by these releases are the criminals in our government whose crimes were exposed. And it just really blows my mind how ridiculous it is that our media will just take at face value from a government expert or agent or bureaucrat that something puts people's lives at risk. They don't question it. They don't push back on it because, again, they are just puppets for the government. They're not real journalists. They're not actual reporters. They're not doing real work like Julian Assange was. And the craziest part about all of that is that this precedent against him endangers them too. Because while he's free, thank God, finally and deservedly, this is not justice. He still had to plead guilty to the crime of doing his job. In America, we're supposed to have a free press. I know the rest of the world does not guarantee this, but here in the U.S., that is what our Constitution says. It says we have a free press, and we are the #1 country that has been persecuting him for the crime of performing real journalism for the past 12 years. And the fact that our government got away with that, Biden and Obama and even Trump, because Trump didn't lift a finger to save this man, didn't lift a finger to stop the DOJ's persecution of Julian Assange. All of us are now more in danger of the same thing happening here to us in the United States, especially if you're a member of the media. But period. This is a threat against everybody's free speech in this country. And the more and more precedents you get like this, the more they stack up. They just continue to chip away and chip away and chip away at that First Amendment, where it's going to just be a piece of paper. It's not going to actually hold any weight. I've had a lot of people ask me, why now? Why did the Biden administration finally play ball? I think it's probably obviously a political calculation. I'm really not sure. I'm glad it happened. I still don't think it's justice, not only because he had to take a plea deal and get charged with something, but also because they made he and his family incur the cost of a private jet for him to be released. They wouldn't let him fly commercial. They wouldn't let him fly directly home. They made him get a private jet, go to these random obscure U.S. islands, and then go home. So I want to direct your attention to this tweet from his wife, Stella Assange. She says, urgent emergency appeal for donations to cover a massive $520,000 debt for jet. Julian's travel to freedom comes at a massive cost. Julian will owe $520,000, which he's obligated to pay back to the Australian government for charter flight VJ199. She says any contribution, big or small, is much appreciated, and I will put the link to donations in my show notes if you want to contribute. All right. Well, speaking of censorship, it turns out there's another front we need to be concerned with here in the U.S. The Supreme Court just issued a decision on a case known as Murphy versus Missouri this week, and it's pretty bad. Let's roll this clip.
It was brought by some social media users and states to try and prevent the Biden administration from reaching out to social media platforms to urge them to remove misinformation, information that they deemed could be dangerous, medical misinformation, say with having to do with COVID and vaccines, or election misinformation, or misinformation developed from deep fakes, Russian, Chinese, etc., like that. The lower courts had sided with those challenging it, asking that the states prohibit, asking the court prohibit the government, the federal government, from reaching out to these social media platforms. It was a 6-3 decision. Supreme Court sided with the Biden administration, saying it can reach out to try and urge social media platforms to remove misinformation. So this is a critical decision. There's one more important First Amendment decision still pending. This bodes well for the administration on that one as well. But important for the intersection of misinformation, First Amendment rights, and the internet.
Yeah, so Scott, what were they arguing against the Biden administration? Were they just simply saying they didn't believe that the federal government had any right to interfere with the business activities of a social media company, and that it came down to the First Amendment? Because anybody watching this is going to say, look, I want to combat misinformation. I don't want my children, I don't want people in my family being exposed to misinformation.
Well, that's exactly right. So those individuals in the states challenging the Biden administration were saying that we don't want the administration to have the power to even reach out to social media platforms and say, look, this is dangerous misinformation directed, say, at teens, or directed at voters, or directed at people who might be considering, medical treatments. They wanted the Biden administration and future administrations to have no power whatsoever to reach out to social media platforms. Supreme Court 6-3 decision, interestingly led by Amy Coney Barrett, said no, the administration does have power to reach out and attempt to ask the media platforms, if you will, to remove disinformation.
All right, Scott Frederickson breaking down the decision in Murphy versus Missouri. Seems like it's the only one we're getting today. We'll be on SCOTUS Watch again tomorrow, Scott, and I'm sure you'll be with us. We appreciate you.
All right, so just to recap, Amy Coney Barrett was a huge L on this one. But as a whole, the ruling actually centered around the fact that the majority of the justices did not believe the plaintiffs had what's known as standing, which means they didn't think they actually had an ability to bring the case in the first place. For those of you who are not familiar with how this goes, this is a huge problem, honestly, in my opinion, in our litigation system. It's one reason the government gets to violate our constitutional rights so easily, because in order to challenge something, particularly once you want to take it up to like the federal Supreme Court level, you have to prove that you as a plaintiff have standing to do so. And standing is not just saying, this law is unconstitutional and thus it violates my constitutional rights, right? Like, it is very obviously a violation of the First Amendment and of all of our First Amendment rights for the government to be able to call Twitter or call Facebook, which they have done numerous times over the past couple of years, and say, hey, we want you to remove these profiles. We want you to censor these narratives. We want you to make sure these terms don't get any traction. That is a violation of your free speech. No questions about it. And from a constitutional lens, I don't think anybody could argue the government has a right to do that. There's small, tiny loopholes, right? Like, if you can actually prove there's a matter of national security or there's a crime being committed, like, that would be your loophole, okay? So, like, if you can prove that somebody is being trafficked online and law enforcement reaches out to the social media platform and says, hey, we want you to remove these posts, don't let this person post anymore, they're trying to commit a crime on your website, that's justified. That's not what the Biden administration was doing. That's not what this precedent that's being established is. Instead, they were deciding which information they liked, which information they wanted to be true, which is entirely subjective. And then they were contacting social media companies and trying to censor Americans and trying to set the official narrative on very important political matters. But in order for this case to have succeeded, the plaintiffs had to have standing, which means they had to be able to say more than this law violates my rights because it's unconstitutional. You have to be able to show that it actually has damages, right? Like, this hurt my business in this way, this impacted my bottom line in this way. And for whatever reasons, they did not feel that the plaintiffs in this case met that standard. So technically it was lost on a technicality, but it is still a major, major loss. And you need to pay very close attention to the judges that sided against us on this issue. Notably, Justice Alito did write a very important dissent, in my opinion, and emphasize the fact that the government does not have the right to do this. This is a very dangerous precedent. It's something that does need immediate action. Free speech is between you and the government. The government does not have the right to censor you. That means it also does not have the right to censor private businesses or to tell those business owners how to moderate content on their platforms. That's very important. And far too many populists on both sides of the aisle these days are trying to go after the tech companies when it comes to these matters. They're trying to be punitive towards them. It's the government that we should be going after. It's the government that is increasingly trying to threaten these social media companies with things like antitrust or other regulations or stripping Section 230, which is important for protection of free speech online. And by doing that, they are pressuring these companies to comply and just do whatever they tell them because they have this big stick they can threaten them with. And instead of rallying against the government and trying to take that big stick out of its hand, the populists are over here screaming at the social media companies who are also having their rights violated. It makes zero sense. Now, a lot of people took to Twitter when this decision came down this week, and many of them were unhappy, as am I. This person said the Supreme Court just ruled in the Murphy versus Missouri case that the Biden administration can coerce social media companies to censor and shadow ban people and posts it doesn't like. Congress will now need to act to enforce the Constitution since the Supreme Court won't. Ooh, burn. Vivek Ramaswamy said very disappointed in the Supreme Court's ruling in Murphy versus Missouri, which effectively says the government can delegate its unconstitutional dirty work to private companies with impunity. This flies in the face of precedent. The court previously held that the government may not induce, encourage, or promote private persons to accomplish what it is constitutionally forbidden to accomplish. That's from the case Norwood versus Harrison in 1973. He said, if it is states' action in disguise, the Constitution applies, period. He went on to say, further government actors have repeatedly threatened social media giants with increased regulation and antitrust action if they fail to shut down disfavored speech. The Supreme Court held in Bantam Books versus Sullivan in 1963 that the government can't use threats to goad private actors to censor speech. In April 2022, then Press Secretary Jim Psaki told reporters that administration officials engage regularly with social media to fight disinformation. Then she immediately floated the possibility of antitrust reforms. The message was clear: censor problematic posts or we'll break up your company. Alito got it right in his dissent. Government collusion with social media is blatantly unconstitutional, and the country may come to regret the court's failure to say so. Sadly, I believe we will indeed. And then RFK Jr. also weighed in. I thought this was interesting because I was unaware of this, but he said the Supreme Court got it wrong and has failed to uphold its responsibility to the Constitution by finding no standing in Murphy versus Missouri. He said, my case of Kennedy versus Biden will proceed in the trial court where there is no question that Children's Health Defense, which is a company I think he runs, and I have standing. Justice Alito's dissent outlines the correct analysis, finding standing and First Amendment violations on the merits. So it's good to know there's at least another case working its way up the pipeline that could try to address this. But it is also important to remember that Congress could do something now, literally now. And Senator Rand Paul, who's one of the few people who actually gets it when it comes to these issues and continues to be a true capitalist and true supporter of limited government, he actually has already tried to introduce legislation that would do just that. The senator took to Twitter to say, today's SCOTUS decision makes it clear we urgently need to defend our God-given right to free expression. It's time to fight back and pass my Free Speech Protection Act so the government can no longer cloak itself in secrecy to undermine the First Amendment rights of Americans. That Free Speech Protection Act has been floating around for some time, and you should pay close attention to who's signing on to it with him and who is notably not. Who is notably not, while continuing to be a blowhard about big tech, I might add. All right, guys, let's move on to our last segment. I want to play a TikTok for you I recently came across that makes the claim that being hygienic might be a far-right pipeline. Watch with me.
Over the next 4 years, we're going to see so many Black women converting to the far right. Yeah, that far right pipeline for us is a brewing. And this is what they want, okay? Over the last 4 years, we've really been pushed to our, past our breaking point. And a lot of people forget that Black people be conservative as fuck already. Really, the only thing that we don't like about conservatives is the racism. First of all, let's just start with what the media has been pushing lately. I'm seeing more and more Black women subscribe to trad life, and it's completely fine if you want to do the aesthetic or even the lifestyle, but you have to be careful because it can lead to where? The far right. Baby, there is a pipeline. See, when you look at trad life and soft girl life, there is a cleanliness aspect to it. So many researchers throughout the years have shown a link between cleanliness and things like neo-Nazism, the alt-right, the far right in general, and what are Black women expected to be and usually, praise ourselves about, our cleanliness. Hitler bathed 4 times a day. He also was a big pusher of willpower. And yes, having willpower is good until it turns into ableism and shaming of people who are in disabled and or different bodies. And Black women always praise ourselves on our willpower because we're forced to have willpower in this fucked up world that treats us the way that it does. Then you see the country songs mixing with the rap song. And though I think that Sexy Red and whoever is allowed to do whatever they want to, it's intentional. You cannot tell me that this rap country crossover mixed in with the fact that we still have Trump, okay, we still have MAGA culture. And a lot of experts will tell you that Trump just gave a conservative unity, okay? They were all scattered all over the place. Trump gave them unity. Trump gave them direction. As you continue to discover yourself and separate yourself from what this society has put on you as a Black woman, be very conscientious of the paths and the roads that you're going down because they might lead somewhere you don't want them to, okay, honey?
I don't know. I need to take a shower after listening to that, I think. What in the HE double hockey sticks was that? I am no stranger to wild and weird political theories, but the idea that liking to bathe, having a clean girl aesthetic is some kind of like slippery slope to the alt-right, that's a new one. That's a new one even for me, okay? And at this point, the Hitler comparisons, I think it's like some kind of a competition just to see who can make the most outlandish one. Like the next thing you know, someone's gonna be like, Hitler ate broccoli, so if you eat broccoli, you're probably a Nazi. Like that's not how analysis of political movements tend to work. This is so bizarre. Like, it's just so abstract and pulling any and everything out of the sky. Also, her premise that there's country and rap collaborations and that's going to push people into the far right is so ignorant of the history of music in general. Like, you do know country music has always had a lot of ties, a lot of history with the Black community and grew out of many of the Black musical traditions, right? Like, you know that? I would hope you would know that. Secondarily, Nelly's been jumping on country tracks since I was like 10 years old, okay? Nelly and Tim McGraw were a whole thing throughout the early 2000s, and I don't think anybody became any more alt-right or pro-Nazi because of it. This is just so weird and outlandish, and also, like, to me, it just feels a little racist. I don't know. If the premise is like, you need to be kind of dirty to not be alt-right. I don't know. It just feels like you're calling everybody on the left dirty, non-hygienic. Are you saying they don't shower? Because that honestly sounds like something like Matt Walsh would say about people on the left. So it's just odd to hear another person on the left say that about their fellow comrades. Anyways, that's a wrap, guys. I'll leave it there for the week. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you in 2 weeks from now. Until then, stay based and have a very happy based 4th of July.